So it's a 250.
5, 4,
215 wrong.
3, 2,
Double 12.
1.
Five.
Oh, and he's finished.
49, so 264.
No!
Missed the board.
Yeah! He's over the
You're
hockey.
over the hockey, those two, I'm afraid.
push me?
Well, you know, you can push him next go, so...
How was
so
that?
back
Oh,
four.
what did they get?
264, Gary.
Wow, that sounds not enough.
Got another minute. Right, ready? Steady, go.
He just gets
20.
He gets one fluky treble
29.
there.
34.
He gets one fluky treble, I'm done.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now, after 6 gruelling weeks of election campaigning, Labour has won a landslide victory. Throughout the campaign, we've been speaking to the Sky News voters panel, all of whom were undecided when the election was called. Sky's Laura Bundock caught up with them after the result to get their thoughts on Sir Keir Starmer's historic election win.
These are the voters we've been following, sharing their debate, their decision, and now their verdict.
A really good result for Labour. I think it's quite an exciting sort of time. Feel like there's big change ahead, hopefully, fingers crossed.
For me, who've never been a Labour voter, pretty sad day, but I don't really think they're going to do anything.
This has been a not the Tories and a pro-reform vote rather than a pro-Labour vote.
Our panel, run by YouGov, started off undecided and ended with over 2/3 switching parties from the last general election.
I just hope that they continue to put forward and put into place all the promises that they've made, and actually to avoid putting up taxes too much.
I'm very grateful that we don't have proportional representation given the percentage of vote for reform voters.
We'll just have to wait and see what Keir can offer, but at the moment I feel a bit angry towards him.
These are the 2019 constituencies our panel represent, and this is what they look like now. Half, that's 23 out of 46 seats changed party.
We've had 4 years of a grossly incompetent government, and I say that as a right-leaning individual who doesn't really like Labour.
My vote's gone for an independent and I'm hoping that they'll make more of a difference than what we've had in the past.
Let's look at some of the words our panel associates with the new government. Plenty of positives: hopeful, different and optimistic, but also uncertain, uninspiring and worrying. Keir Starmer made a direct promise to people who didn't vote for him. Are they listening?
I'm struggling with the cost of living. It is increasingly difficult, and I'm hoping that we can look to Labour to improve our lives.
I worry at too much power in the hands of one single party. I don't like that on any, whether it be Conservative, Lib Dem or Labour.
I think we have to be hopeful for the future and just get behind that this is a time of change.
They didn't all choose this government, they're not all happy, but our voters all hope their voices will be heard. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by political commentator Benedict Spence and journalist and author Christina Patterson. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Mail on Sunday. Its headline, Brexit, now the retreat begins. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.
When you cover big, tense protests, there's almost always a moment when the atmosphere changes. There's a different noise, and you start to smell tear gas in the air.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
When we spoke to the fishermen down in Cornwall, all the politics from Westminster was a million miles away. This was about their jobs, their livelihoods.
always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Sir Keir Starmer has told his new ministers that they must deliver on Labour's promises. A save by Jordan Pickford has secured victory for England in a quarter-final penalty shootout against Switzerland at the Euros 2024. Emma Raducanu's decision to pull out of the mixed doubles means her partner Andy Murray has played his last match at Wimbledon. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with political commentator Benedict Spence and journalist and author Christina Patterson. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Mail leads on Brexit, warning of a potential U-turn under the new Labour government. The Express quotes the Prime Minister on migration, saying the Rwanda plan is dead and buried. The Observer also looks at Labour's landslide and the Prime Minister telling his cabinet it's time to deliver on their promises. The Sunday Telegraph says Blair ally Alan Milburn has been drafted in to drive NHS reform after he backed private sector involvement and consumer choice. And England's win against Switzerland takes the front spot on the Daily Star after their penalty shootout. The Mirror also leads on the football and England's penalty joy as the Three Lions head through to the semi-finals. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Benedict Spence and Christina Patterson. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the front of the Express newspaper and talking about one of the Conservative policies that Sir Keir Starmer is going to reverse or already has reversed, the Rwanda plan. Dead and buried is the headline, Christina.
Yes, well, first of all, it's just very nice to see the word PM about Keir Starmer, because I've been sitting here for many years under governments that have felt totally alien, actually, to what many of us desire for our country. And I just want to say what an enormous relief it is to have Keir Starmer and a Labour government in power. And he's just being consistent. He said he's said consistently that the Rwanda plan would not work. An enormous amount of money has been spent on it, and I think it's something like we're not going to get back the £250 million that have already been spent, and not a single person has been sent involuntarily to Rwanda so far. The Tories have wanted to sound tough on illegal immigration, but they have succeeded in doing precisely nothing. So they are now going to invest their money on security instead, on tackling the smuggling gangs and taking a very different approach. It will be very difficult. It's a very difficult problem to solve, but this is symbolically important because the Rwanda plan has been sort of the flagship of Tory policy for so long, and so it's it's interesting that the first law he's passing is to stop it.
Yes, I'm no surprise there, Benedict. It is something that he had been saying in the run-up to the election the entire time.
Yes, it's hard to say that the Rwanda plan has been reversed, seeing as the Tories, even though they announced it, never really actually implemented it in the first place, because even they didn't truly believe that it was ever going to happen. And I think it's one of the saddest sort of emblems of the last couple of years of the Conservatives that this was their sort of great get-out-of-jail scheme, how we're going to get the public back on side. And everybody knew, no, it's not going to happen. You know it's not going to happen. The Rwandans know it's not going to happen. That's why they flogged off all the accommodation. The only person I think is probably very disappointed about this is probably President Kagame, who's made a real killing out of this. A huge amount of money has been spent for very little in terms of sending people overseas. But Christina is right. The alternative solutions, the ones that might actually be implemented at some point to try to stem the tide of illegal migration into this country are going to be very expensive, and they're going to be very difficult. And this is something on which obviously he's sort of, Sir Keir Starmer is starting from a very low baseline, given that the Conservatives have simply sort of overseen a gradual increase in the numbers every year. We forget, actually, that under New Labour, the previous Labour government was very successful at bringing down numbers of illegal migrants, although that tended to be via ferries and the Channel. But they did manage to get those numbers down, and they were also very good at the other thing that the Tories haven't been very good at, and that's deporting people back to their own countries. And as much as the Tories like to complain about the ECHR, the laws have not changed, actually. Under New Labour, lots of people were deported, I think almost tenfold in what the Tories actually ended up deporting back to their own countries. That didn't require any sort of major law changes. I think if Sir Keir Starmer is to sort of nip that little talking point in the bud that has become a very large talking point, certainly on the right in this country, he could do very well by getting tough on migration gangs, or smuggling gangs, and deporting people, especially people who commit crimes in this country, back to their own country after they've finished their sentence. A lot of people don't end up getting deported after they commit crimes in this country. Those would be very easy wins, low-hanging fruit, but expensive, and they require a lot of effort. And I'm afraid to say, that seemed to be the main thing that the Conservatives in the last couple of years didn't particularly enjoy, was doing the hard work and putting in the effort. And I think what people will be hoping for now is a shift, I think, straight off the bat.
And the problem, as you say, still exists. Christina, what do you think his realistic options are for tackling the problem that does still exist?
I think they're quite minimal, to be honest, but I think it has to. I think he's right that you have to target the smuggling gangs. I think in order to do that, you need cooperation from the side of the French. Obviously, things are changing in France at the moment, and who knows where we'll be after tomorrow. But I think the fact that Britain has taken such an anti-EU stance for so long hasn't helped in relations with France, and that's that's where these gangs are coming from, and that's where the illegal migrants are coming from. And by the way, let's not forget that a number of them, okay, they have all been dubbed illegal now because of the law change, but many of them were proven to be refugees. They eventually were asylum seekers who were proven to be refugees. So it's not as if everyone who has come over on a boat or even on a lorry or a ferry has been shown to be, kind of completely wrong to be in this country. But I do think Keir Starmer, as we know, was Director of Public Prosecutions. He takes law and order extremely seriously. And I think that the whole tone of what has emerged both yesterday and today, and in the press conference today and in what we've heard from the first cabinet meeting, is about action. It's about quiet competence, expertise, gathering expertise, and doing things carefully and properly, which has been the exact opposite of what's happened in the Tory government for some years. So I believe he's serious in tackling this. Yvette Cooper has been devoting enormous amounts of effort and attention to this matter for years. So it's not as if she's, you know, not like one of these housing ministers who's been parachuted into it without knowing anything about it. She knows a lot about the issue. So although it is a very difficult thing to tackle, I have confidence that they will do a better job than the Tories have done on it, which isn't saying much, it has to be said.
OK, Benedict, let's move on to The Observer. And seemingly the Labour government have hit the ground running. Sir Keir Starmer very much first day on the job today, saying that it's now time for his ministers to deliver on the promises that they've already made.
Well, I mean, it's not like he was going to turn around and go, right, that's it, it's 6 o'clock on Friday, I'm going to clock off. It would have given us all a laugh. But I think, you know, given that his whole thing has been about sort of quiet, competent managerialism, actually getting things back to working, he wasn't going to say anything else. And, you know, it's interesting, actually. Supposedly he told, or, you know, communicated to his prospective ministers via intermediaries that actually they were going to be judged entirely on output and results, which is the sort of thing that actually you'd think, well, one would hope that is how government is run. But Dominic Cummings regularly used to sort of rail against the fact that actually that was not the metric, that when he was in government he found that that was not how cabinet members were deemed to have done a good job. It was more to do with how they'd communicated with the press. And he found that sort of tremendously frustrating. So it's interesting to see, therefore, that there are two men who, with very different political opinions, but who are sort of broadly on the same page about what it is that a cabinet minister needs to be doing. There's, of course, also been some rather curious appointments to cabinet. It's something that you see a lot more in the US, where actually people from outside of the political party, experts perhaps to a degree, are put into cabinet positions. We've seen that in the case of Sir Patrick Balance and Mr. Timpson, the proprietor of James Timpson.
Well, why do you say curious?
Well, simply because it's not something that's actually done very often in this country. So straight off the bat, that is unusual, that these positions have not gone to party allies, which is always the first thing that it tends to happen in governments. I think it's very notable, for instance, that Emily Thornberry, who has been a very sort of a vocal supporter of Sir Keir Starmer and would have been, I think, considered a very obvious candidate to be Lord Chancellor, has not been given that role. In the case of James Timpson, I think it's curious because he has got a very good record at getting people in his role to do with prisons, which is what he'll be doing. He's done good jobs at getting people out of prison into work and helping them to turn around their lives. That works in, we've seen, with his business, that works in a limited number of cases. We've yet to see actually how far you can expand that to the broader prison population. There are going to be people for whom that sort of thing does work. There are going to be individuals for whom sort of community service does work. There are also going to be a lot of people for whom that is absolutely not appropriate. Sir Keir Starmer has already come out today and said he believes there are far too many people in prison in this country. What concerns me there slightly is the fact that on the watch of the Conservatives, the Ministry of Justice underwent 40% budget cuts, by far the biggest budget cuts of anything else. You know, people talk about the NHS and education. Actually, no, it is justice that underwent the most damage. 17 prisons were closed in this country and were not, you know, replaced with any other capacity, including the prison that had, I think, the second best rehabilitation rates, was closed because they thought it was a bad look to have a prison inside an old castle in Lancaster. These are actually the reasons why our prisons are overflowing. Not because we send too many people to prison, because we've got rid of the capacity. But opening that capacity is very, very expensive to do, especially if you haven't already changed the planning laws. So it's interesting, it's curious, that an individual has been brought in to have an input into this area, and one of his main things is saying there are too many people in prisons, at a time when the government is having to really tighten its belt and say we don't necessarily have the money to increase the capacity, which is probably what a lot of other people, a lot of voters, I suspect, at a time that crime is on the rise, and there is a real sort of decay in a lot of trust in the police to arrest people and put them in prison, and there are massive backlogs in the justice system, court cases 2, in some cases 3 years behind. I think it's very curious, therefore, that an individual who is not a politician has been brought in, whose main thing is we need fewer people in prisons.
I don't agree.
Well, that's good. That would be bad if we did.
Am I allowed?
Very quickly, yes.
Yeah. I think James Timpson and his entire family dynasty knows an enormous amount about the prison system, as of course does Keir Starmer. You know, his entire professional career has been involved with crime and criminals, and I think he is absolutely right to say that there are too many people in prison, in that, for example, about 50% of youngsters brought up in the care system end up in prison or in young offenders institutes. And an enormous number of people who are in prison are reoffenders. If you tackled that, education, support, I've been involved with it. I was on the board of a charity for some years that did a lot of education and skills work in prisons. It's slow, painstaking, careful stuff, but our prison system basically is a factory for criminals. And if we address that, then we might have then we would have a smaller prison population.
No, you can't come back. Let's go to the Express and looking at the Conservative fury at bonkers election call. This is the July the 4th election call, which many were taken by surprise and thought was way too early, Benedict.
Yes, the dust is beginning to settle. The mourning period, its very short mourning period, is over, and I think the knives are coming out. Nobody expects Rishi Sunak to be around for much
longer. Were the
longer.
knives ever put away?
It's true, but they were rather blunt by the end. They'd been overused massively, so perhaps there's some sharpening going on. But obviously, lots of blame is going to be apportioned for the wipeout, which was not actually as bad as some people forecast. It sounds slightly bizarre to be sitting there going, look, on the bright side, actually, it's triple digits.
You've got more than 70.
Yes, it's phenomenal. It's a great turnout. But obviously, now it's going to be a question of who it is that wants to take over the party and how it is that they are going to set themselves apart from what's gone before. It's going to be rather brutal. And I think Tim Montgomery, who has obviously got his finger on the pulse of many things in the Conservative Party, has been imploring all across today and yesterday, please don't rush the process of a new leadership contest. But we know that they are going to, they're going to be out of the traps as soon as possible, because ultimately, this isn't an opportunity that comes around even that often, even for the Conservative Party. You might have to wait a whole year before there's another leadership contest. So lots of people saying it was a mistake to call this election at this time, which clearly there were many mistakes made, although I don't think it would have got much better if they'd left it. But the key thing is, of course, about the preparation. Nobody knew that it was going to happen, and when people did, they went out and put bets on it rather than actually prepare for the election. So it's just been a desperately unedifying spectacle, and it's going to live long in the memory. And it's going to be really difficult to rebuild the image of the party as a competent party that could potentially one day be in government if the first thing people think of is, oh, yeah, he left D-Day early. Oh, yeah, they all put bets on everything, and nothing was working by the time that he left. Oh, and he couldn't even tell that it was raining when he went to announce that the election was taking place. Really
Christina, the front runners, Tom Tugendhat, James Cleverly, Kemi Badenoch, Robert Jenrick.
Well, I think yes. I mean, it's evident who wants to run. At least Suella Braverman is not in that particular lineup. I think that the issue here, all of those. I mean, they're not mad suggestions, and of those, 3 are relatively moderate, and one is definitely, Kemi Badenoch is definitely on the right of the party. But I think the mistake they have made in recent years is to assume that people want a more right-wing Tory party than we've had, which has been a very right-wing Tory party in lots of ways, obviously in terms of taxation and spending, a rather left-wing one. But the fact that the vast majority of people in this country, whether or not they voted Labour, voted for progressive parties of one kind or another, shows that they are wrong about that. And it will be really interesting to see how this pans out.
Benedict, Suella Braverman not in that lineup there in the Express, but she has written in the Sunday Telegraph and very barbed comments, actually, said that the Conservatives deserved their historic election defeat.
Yes, like Cassandra sort of shouting to everybody that, if only you'd listened to me, things would be different. I mean, I think she's making a lot of this about herself, which is that the rest of the party sort of deserved to lose. And when she was giving her acceptance speech, she said, I'm sorry that nobody listened to me. And everybody thinks, great, thank you for being a team player, Suella. It did take until about a couple of days before the election for you to start saying these things, but you could have done a little bit more dignified. I don't think Suella Braverman is going to last the next Parliament as a Conservative MP. I think all of this, unite the right, we must do deals with Farage, we must be nicer to Farage, is laying the ground, frankly, perhaps for a defection to an upstart right-wing party, amongst whom she will be a very big fish in a small pond. And I think that's the case because she's not going to be the Conservative leader. And a smart Conservative leader, once they're in, will make sure that her career has a very firm ceiling on top of it. So that's what I suspect a lot of this is going to be. If I thought there was going to be a Conservative leader, if I could put money on it, apart from Tom Tugendhat, I think it might be Priti Patel. And that person would be on the similar wing to Suella Braverman, but carries a lot more respect from party members and other MPs than Suella does. Possibly, therefore, far more dangerous than a Tom Tugendhat to her career.
Christina, one name that you'd put forward?
Possibly Victoria Atkins, actually.
Oh, OK. Interesting.
Not on the
Difference of
paper.
opinion. Not in the papers at all. Thank you both. We're going to take a break. Coming up, we've done it on the front of the Sunday Mirror as England reached the Euro semi-finals after winning on penalties against Switzerland. Stay with us for more.
Well, the issue has been potatoes are quite a challenging crop to grow, generally, historically, for a few years, and they're getting even harder to grow now with the extreme weather conditions we've been having. It's getting harder to actually grow the crop as well as lifting. Can you remember a few years back when we had the drought? Well, that took a toll on seed stocks and also the stocks that we had within the country. And now with the wet weather that we had last year, even this last year when we tried to plant the crop, it was challenging. Lifting was like harvesting the crop was really challenging. The wet weather we had was the wettest winter we ever had on record. We're trying to lift them, getting tractors stuck in the field, trying to get the potatoes out, making sure the potatoes are in store, planting this year's crop as well. It's been a really, really challenging couple of years. We need we need food security for a start back on the agenda. The government needs to look at how we produce food in this country and make sure it's higher up and make sure that we have policies in place to help us. Input costs are rise now nearly 28% in the last 2 years. So our input costs have really gone up and we need different policies and we need stuff to help us combat the extreme weather conditions we've been having. Such things as on-farm reservoirs, that is a great idea. So we can store water on farms, so in wet weathers we can take the water out of the system, put into the reservoirs. That not only helps us then in drought conditions, then we've got water to water the crop, but also as well stops homes flooding. When it does get wet, we can take the cisterns out. So we really need government to help us put these infrastructures and these are really high investments on farm that can help, benefit everyone, not just us, the farmers. I plan nearly 2 years in advance my crops, what I'm going to grow and where they're going to grow. So it's not so simple as going, I'm just not going to grow that crop. But a lot of people actually have. There's less potatoes farmers now than what there has been. A lot of people, potatoes are quite hard to grow. There are a lot of inputs, as we said, a lot of labour involved. There's a lot of hassle as such. And a lot of people now after this wet weather just go, do you know what, I'm not going to plant them. So if we do, there's not really much else we can really plant. We just go for the basic crops that we grow in this country, such as wheat, barley and oilseed rape. And that's kind of the rotation that they're looking at.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Benedict Spence and Christina Patterson. We're going to have a look at the Mirror front page, and it's on many other front pages. But the football, we've done it, Benedict.
We have.
Last time round, you were saying that we weren't going to.
I said that we wouldn't win the Euros. I didn't say how far we'd
go.
Okay. But, I mean, the more I say it, the more I try to jinx it, the more likely it is that it's going to work. I'm sure that the fates aren't paying attention to what I'm saying right now. But, yes, we've won. Although it was not a very good performance, a slightly better performance than the last one, I have to admit I did laugh when Switzerland scored because I thought, well, that's classic, isn't it? I couldn't even sort of be miserable about it. I just thought, of course, Switzerland have scored, and we're going to make it difficult for ourselves. But another late goal, extra time, and another penalty shootout win, which somehow, rather belatedly, after all these years, we've finally worked out how to do. We're into the next round where we face the Netherlands and calm as you like Virgil van Dijk. So I suspect that will be a little bit more tricky than the Swiss, because the Netherlands are actually quite good at football.
Be positive.
I shouldn't be.
We scored every single penalty, and I wore my lucky England colours.
Well, it worked, didn't it? Things were very... I did not watch it, you won't be surprised to hear, but I heard a lot of shrieking and groaning from downstairs, and then my partner said he couldn't bear to watch the penalty shootout, and very kindly went and made me some supper, and then, of course, was absolutely heartbroken because he missed it. But yes, it's a roller coaster just being in the same household. He was definitely more worked up about this than the election. So.
Well, he didn't watch, but he got the result that he wanted. So maybe he shouldn't watch on Wednesday as well. Benedict, staying with sport, Andy Murray. His last Wimbledon.
It is his last Wimbledon, and he will not be playing quite as many games as we were hoping, because I think he's not going to be playing mixed doubles now with Emma Raducanu, and that's not because he's injured, it's because she is injured. And I have to say, just as a separate thing, it's really sad that her career, still being very early, is being plagued by injuries this young. But he will still get to play doubles with his brother. But, you know, calling time on a phenomenal tennis career. And, you know, you have to say, sort of set against the likes of Djokovic and Nadal, who have done incredible things, it almost seems like quite a small one, but you can't take away, actually, the sheer brilliance of being able to win the number of titles that he's won, set against those three fantastic players. So, really fantastic stuff. And it's a shame that it's coming to an end, but all good things have to, I suppose.
And there's been a tribute from the Princess of Wales on Twitter. She put out a message to Andy Murray saying, an incredible Wimbledon career comes to an end. You should be so very proud. Andy Murray, on behalf of all of us, thank you.
Well, of all the sport I've watched in my life, which is not very much, some of Andy Murray's finals at Wimbledon's have been among them. I think clearly he's a remarkable sportsman, but also I think a really lovely man, and I felt so sad for him that he, you know, that his career is ending this way. But you know,
Christina,
thank you from all of us.